But in terms of, if you look at our outcomes, they're still not great. I mean, in theory, having total immersion, access to total immersion, language and cultural development, opportunities, should be producing a really culturally strong Māori population that can, foot it at any level with the general population. The truth of the matter is that I can gain a degree from Te Whare or Aotearoa, and I can gain a degree from the University of Victoria University, and it is this degree in this institution that is recognised in New Zealand society, and that is elevated and has more status in New Zealand society. I've really been thinking long and hard about this. I've been working with a group of early childhood teachers trying to develop kaupapa Māori in the early childhood education context. Theoretically, it should have already happened by now. We're 10 years past 1990, and this discourse about biculturalism and treaty rights and two partners to the treaty. But in actual fact, the obstacles are not only at the government policy and the rules by which we engage in this game, but the obstacles also exist in the very personal level, attitudinal, mindsets of New Zealanders who are saying, okay, separatism, separate development, and this is one of the arguments when we think about Indigenous psychology. This is the argument that we've been butting up against since 1988 when we started this journey. Favouritism, preferential treatment, separatism. What are you saying? You're having these kaupapa Māori tutorials for Māori psych students. You're favouring them and you're producing second-rate psychologists. So that's not so much about an institutional position as much as it is about individual attitudes, individual, a lack of awareness, and a lot of that I've come to understand is driven by fear, and it's fear of the unknown. And arguments like, okay, well actually, what about our multicultural population? That's all comes from a fear base that is really saying, we don't want you to have too much power. We don't want you to, we're all one nation. We can't be condoning or advocating for you to really have the full value and weight of your treaty rights recognised, and if we give you an inch, you're going to try and take a mile. So I don't know if I've answered any question or if that's been valuable, but there is a difference between rhetorical biculturalism, and I see this in DHBs, I see this in, IHC, I see this in Pākehā, Presbyterian support services, who race to develop a treaty policy, who, get bicultural training, buy it in, take their Pākehā staff or their staff away to a marae, which is a really kind of artificial environment if you're delivering services into a Māori community. Going on to a marae is not necessarily going to prepare you to deal with ADHD in an absolutely impoverished Māori family with 15 kids and X number of generations and, urban South Auckland. But it may make you feel a little bit more comfortable around, saying kia ora to your clients or, but it's not the real. It's not the real deal in terms of preparing you to work in a real way, in a helpful way, in a meaningful way with Māori people who need your support as psychologists.
So what would prepare you properly for that?
Pardon?
What exactly would prepare like
I don't think that there's anything better than experience and exposure. But when you go into for example, if you were to come into my farm, there are not standards of conduct. What I would prefer if you're coming into my whānau and working with my teenage son is that you not even necessarily be able to say kia ora, or, I would like you to pronounce our names properly, but I would rather that you had analysed your own cultural baggage, that you knew where you stood on issues of culture, that you knew where you stood on any assumptions that often we're not even conscious of the assumptions that we carry. Māori man walks towards us in a street, got tattoos, and he looks pretty big and scary, so we automatically cross the road. We're not even conscious, and I say this for myself as a Māori woman because I do the same, that I'm not even fully conscious of the baggage that I carry that impacts on the way I am in the world and the way I work with people who are culturally different.
Do you think that in some Māori families that this, I'm just putting it out there, that culturally sensitive, say the ideal happened and there was this fabulous psychologist who was going in and they were really culturally, awesome.
Yeah.
But they were so maybe un-Maori culturally, it's been pushed down that it wouldn't relate.
Yeah, I'll give you a practical example of this. I was working with a Māori man in ACC, sexual abuse treatment, who said, I don't want a bar of her because she may know my whānau, because, I think that, there's a certain, sometimes there can be an amount of pulling the wool over the eyes. And also the fact that there are different accountabilities. When you're a Māori practitioner working with whānau, there are different accountabilities and different processes. So just before we had a hui with the Indigenous Research Group, and one of our researchers is doing work on an intercultural sensitising, looking at attitudes and values of one culture towards another when people are going into a new cultural context. And she said something really interesting. This came from one of her research participants, and it was this person works in mental health service delivery, and she works in such a way that she cannot detach herself from the people that she's working with. So it's not a kind of a clinical, clear-cut, go and do the business and leave. It's actually you invest a lot of your spirit, your energy, your time. You know what you're looking at because you've experienced what it is that you're looking at and what it is that you're trying to help out with. And next week we'll talk about this concept or process of intergenerational soul movement. In my clinical practice, it was CBT and behavioural modification. And I would say to, when I was teaching at Mass